Just so that everybody on the call is aware, we do record all of the Education Scotland webinars, and they're on our CLD channel of the Education Scotland YouTube page if you ever want to catch up, or indeed to look over the presentations again. And all links and presentations will be shared after the webinar. So at this point then, if I can hand over to Bridget and Sharon, who will be doing our first update, and I'll bring up your presentation for you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Laura. And good morning to everybody. I'm just going to switch my video off so that it's not a distraction, and Laura will fire up the PowerPoint. So I'm hoping that some of you have heard of Scottish Natural Heritage. We are still SNH legally, but last August we rebranded to become Nature Scot. So that's perhaps been a surprise to some of you who have maybe heard of and got used to SNH, but yeah, we're still that legally. We're a government agency created by statute, rebranded to Nature Scot, as I say. And first slide, oops, when you're ready, Laura. Sorry, the second slide when you're ready. So my name's Bridget Finton, and I work within Nature Scot's People and Places team. And the second slide, please, Laura, will show you the remit of the organisation and also what People and Places team do. Are you running the second slide, Laura? I can't, all I see is the title slide. Oops.
Yeah, I'll start it again. I was running through the slides, so I'm not sure why you weren't seeing it like that. So I'll just start it from the start again and go through them. And if you can just let me know that you can see it moving through, Bridget, that'd be great.
Right, whether it's just me or if everybody else was stuck on
Hi Bridget, no, it's Dara. Laura, I was the same, and we'll shout out this time if it goes through the slideshow, and if it's maybe just been a bit temperamental, Laura, I'll give it a go, and that lets you view the charts, don't worry.
Great, thanks Dara.
Yeah. So I'm looking for slide 2, which is who we are and what we do, which is basically an intro. So I'll explain. For those that haven't come across Nature Scot, we're created by statute, we're a government agency, and we advise on most environmental issues and also issues that affect the environment. We also own and manage some of Scotland's national nature reserves. And
sorry, we're just going to flick over to Dara because I don't know why it's not flicking up for me. Just give me 2 seconds, Bridget.
That's absolutely fine. The joys of technology.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So just perhaps to explain, I really welcome this opportunity to speak to community learning and development colleagues. My role within Nature Scot has, for many, many years, too many to remember, been primarily about our kind of encouraging people to enjoy the outdoors, part of our remit. That slide's looking good for me, thank you, Dara. Yeah, okay, you can see there the very basic remit for Nature Scot. And as I say, Sharon and I work within the People and Places team, which is all about, creating better places, very much so in the urban and the urban fringe areas. So our part of the organisation is very much the people agenda, and our basic corporate aim is to increase and widen participation in people enjoying nature and the outdoors. So, as I say, we offer advice, we own and manage some of Scotland's national nature reserves, and in the context of today's event, some of the key partners that my team work with, for example, Scottish Forestry in terms of forestry policy, Forestry and Land Scotland in terms of the National Forest Estate. I in particular have worked over the last 5 years on Nature Scott's health agenda. So we are working in partnership currently with, for example, Public Health Scotland, Education Scotland, Transport Scotland, and from the voluntary sector side of things, Green Space Scotland, Learning Through Landscapes, and also delivery bodies like TCV, the Conservation Volunteers, Paths for All, John Muir Trust, just to name a few. In terms of Nature Scott and corporately what we do, why does it matter? Essentially, we're helping to tackle the key challenges of today: biodiversity loss, climate change, and also the public health long-term crisis. I mean, in Scotland, we were often called the sick man of Europe. I think our record has improved recently in some areas, but it's still a huge challenge, and disconnect from nature and the environment could well be part of that. So we're working corporately to achieve resilient ecosystems, net zero, and reflecting current circumstances, working towards green recovery and a well-being economy, and using nature and the outdoors as a health promoting asset and a learning resource is part of all of this. Essentially, my message is healthy places support healthy people. Next slide, please. Thank you. Not going to spend much time on this. We are an environment organisation, but we do have, as I've said, a keen interest in health and well-being. And there is a plethora of evidence out there in terms of the health and well-being benefits of engaging in the outdoors and nature. Lots of evidence about physical, mental, emotional, and social health and well-being benefits. An established and growing evidence base, and then came along COVID-19, and lots of media coverage over the last year or so about lockdown, use of local places and nature spaces for exercise and also mental refreshment. So yeah, many of the risks that are mentioned in this slide are about physical health. So it is largely about physical activity, but also contact with nature has been shown to, in particular, help people cope with anxiety, manage stress, reduce aggression, help youngsters in particular concentrate better in an outdoor setting and with natural components in that. What we call green health also helps to tackle health inequalities. The resource that we're using is local, widely accessible, and in general doesn't require any special kit to get out there. It's also a very conducive setting for people to make connections to places, particularly in their local areas, connections to people, and connections to purpose. You could perhaps say, next slide please, that the outdoors is our natural health service. And here we are. Very briefly, this is a slide that we often use just to kind of introduce the concept of our natural health service, which is an initiative that has been led for about the last 5 years by Nature Scott, along with some key partners. And what I would draw your attention to in particular here is the what we call the 3 pillars in the middle, ranging from everyday contact with nature, which is generally people engaging independently, through to more specific nature-based interventions for people with defined needs. I'm going to draw your attention in particular in the context of today's event to the middle pillar, pillar 2, where Nature Scott has worked for a long time, but yes, in particular in the last 5 years or so, with a number of national partners. Many of you probably have heard about Paths for All, which is a national voluntary sector organisation that networks many of the local health walk groups that are led by local volunteers, and as well as the physical activity, people very much provide feedback that the social connection is what they value in terms of general well-being, talking, sharing, and in some cases learning along the way. Also mentioned here is green gyms. TCV, the Conservation Volunteers, supports a network of green gym groups, which are primarily engaging people in undertaking environmental conservation tasks, but green gym is also very, very much about making sure that people also gain physical and mental health benefits. Next slide, please. Thank you. So thinking about that engagement, being in the outdoors, obtaining health benefits from being in the outdoors. An example akin to Green Gym is this local one from Cumbernauld. This is an example of that kind of middle pillar where, in this case, TCV and Scottish Wildlife Trust, as part of the Cumbernauld Living Landscape Initiative, provides sessions for either open groups or, I think, targeted groups. In particular, this project is aimed at people experiencing inequalities, which could include learning difficulties. So generally, the initiative encourages people to come for a 12-week program, and a range of outdoor activities are provided in a supportive atmosphere: walks, tasks, mindfulness, tai chi, bushcraft, environmental art, and environmental education. Learning about species and birds. And the Cumbernauld project also undertook a video kind of learning project where the participants were able to use the technology and essentially take footage of the project and talk about what they were gaining from it. So the Wild Ways Well project is based on the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, a report that I think came out in 2008, and it's a system whereby behaviours strongly associated with positive well-being and good mental health, in this case, are applied to natural settings. Next slide, please. So lastly from me, our Natural Health Service initiative, the principal way that this is being implemented on the ground is us and our national partners working with local partners at a local authority or a health board, area health board scale, and helping to establish these green health partnerships, which, as I say, are quite large scale. They're led by primarily the relevant local authority and area health board, but also with a wide range of other sectoral interests. Some of them are illustrated here. The primary aim of these partnerships is to upscale and mainstream green health into policy and practice. So very much linking the health sector, health and social care sector, with organisations who can either point them in the direction of places, or these organisations are actually delivering, for example, those Pillar 2 or Pillar 3 supportive projects and programmes. So the 4 locations at the moment are shown here, and it's all about making those links, the added value of bringing the right people and the right interests together to facilitate coordination, collaboration, co-production, and of course co-benefits. In this case, helping to deliver health and also learning objectives. the outdoors and green space is a local asset that both interests can make use of, and from what Laura has said to me in the last couple of months, community learning and development has embraced taking your specialism outdoors. So just finishing, if you're in any of these areas, follow the Natural Health Service link URL at the end of the presentation and see if you can make touch with the Green Health Partnerships, or even if you're out with those 4 areas, I would very much recommend making touch with your local authority green space teams, countryside ranger services, etc. They are very much tuned into the health agenda. That's all from me. Thanks, Laura, and over to Sharon.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can see me. I can't see myself at the minute. I'm Sharon Cunningham. I'm one of 2 outdoor learning advisors at Nature Scot, working part-time. I work mainly with the formal education sector, so I'll probably lapse into talking about schools and teachers and things, but I hope you'll find what I'm saying relevant to your sector as well. I know a lot of CLD workers do use resources that are aimed at schools, so yeah, fingers crossed this will be useful to you. Next slide, please. So as well as the physical and mental health benefits that Bridget's been talking about, there can be massive benefits to learning outdoors. So often young people or anyone can sort of say, well, this person's good at reading, or this person's good at maths, or this person's good at writing, or whatever. But when you go outdoors, often it levels the playing field, or it can allow a different person to shine in that setting. It provides real world learning experiences, so it's much more relevant and interesting to the people, helps learning stick, makes it more memorable. And you'll know as well it's a great environment to gain awards or qualifications and develop skills for learning life and work. It offers challenge and enjoyment. We do regular surveys of outdoor learning in schools, and teachers feedback that it does offer challenge and enjoyment and increases engagement. So through that, we haven't done the research, but we expect that this will increase attainment as well. So it can teach people about appropriate risk-taking in real-life settings, improve self-confidence, independence, develop initiative-taking, interpersonal skills, teamwork. I'm sure you find that yourself. It can reduce conflict or help people bond within the group or with the group leaders. It can help people be more focused when they move to more directed tasks, either back indoors or outdoors as well. And it can create a sense of ownership and respect for the place and for nature, and bring a bit of well-being that way. We found as well through Scottish Forestry research that it can have a knock-on effect on families in the wider communities if young people are going outdoors in our setting. In our examples, this feeds into families and wider community respecting the place and using the place better. And for us, it's part of the curriculum, it's part of the standards for teachers, and pupils, through their right for learning for sustainability, have a right to daily contact with nature. So in short, it's great for the person, it's great for learning, it's great for nature and the place and the community. And I think it was Sunnyside Primary in Glasgow that coined the phrase, it's a hufty, you have to do it. Next slide, please. So one of our most recent projects has been the Learning in Local Green Space project, where we've worked with 115 schools from the 20% most disadvantaged communities in Scotland. And we've created a whole load of resources as part of this that we hope will be useful to other people out with the project. One of these is the Beyond Your Boundary resource that you can see the web link at the top there. We'll talk a bit more about it later, but it's essentially goes through the steps that the schools went through and sort of thinking about why they wanted to get involved, how they would find a space and negotiate access, whether that's physical access or getting permission from the landowner, starting out using it, and some of them went on to improve the green space, and then individual teachers encouraged the wider establishment to also take learning into local green space. So the spreading and embedding bit there. Next slide, please. So one of the first barriers that the teachers taking part in this project came across was just knowing where to go, because a lot of them don't actually live where they work. So we created this tool. It's not a very snappy URL, but that's the URL at the top there. It's the green space map for outdoor learning. And just using the example of Linvale Primary there, you can put in a postcode or you can put in the name of a school. And Linvale Primary is coming up in the left there, the little mortar board icon in the box there, and then it's searching for green space within a 5-minute walk. That's what's been selected there in the example, and that is highlighted by the sort of grey blue hatched area, and the green space itself is the purple area. And the school decided to use the sort of purple triangle on the right hand side of the image there for their learning in local green space. So your users could be searching that themselves, putting in a postcode and seeing what there was locally for them to use. Also, at the Beyond Your Boundary resource, the URL there, there's a link to an audit tool. So you could be going along there and having a look at the site, doing your risk assessment, and doing a little bit of an audit to look at the potential for learning. Generally, the sort of more diverse the site, the more diverse the learning opportunities. But that's an exercise that perhaps some of your users could be going through as well. Next slide, please. So also then Beyond Your Boundary, as I say, it is worded sort of school, teacher, etc., but hopefully relevant to a lot of you as well. There's a policies and procedures section. It's quite a hefty document. It's not designed for printing, but it's about 70 pages long, so I thought I'd highlight certain pages for you. So this policies and procedures section is thinking about sort of planning ahead and thinking about what you might do if the weather suddenly turned, or if you came across antisocial behaviour, or somebody became separated from the group, how you would deal with these situations, and having a procedure in place from the outset. The boundaries and routines, sort of setting up the physical learning area for that visit, doing dynamic risk assessments together, thinking about how you're going to gather or gain attention from the group without yelling, ideally. So coming up with these sorts of things and sort of developing routines that way so everyone knows what things mean and where they stand. There's information on funding. Because it's a national resource, there's not detail, local detail on funding, but there are links to other places where you might find funding to help you improve a green space perhaps, or get waterproofs and wellies, that sort of thing, to help you access the green space. Linking to partners, again, there's loads of partners. Bridget referred to some of them earlier, ranger services, green space teams and that sort of thing, but there's suggested partners and links to them in the document as well. The developing young workforce and award schemes. A lot of the schools work towards various awards through the project. So the RSPB Wild Challenge Awards, John Muir Awards, Archaeology, I forget what it's called, Heritage Hero Awards, I think it's called. You'll probably be aware of the awards network. You can do a search on the awards network page and look for an award that suits your group and what you're aiming for with your group, and that's a really useful tool. There's also some of the common challenges and issues that the schools came across and how they addressed it, and there's a few case studies that this links to as well, so that's always handy because, as I say, they are very common issues that people come across. Final slide, please. Thanks. I'm not sure how easily you can see this. Unfortunately, the URLs are not very catchy, but I think this will be shared with you. Just to highlight some of the resources, there's so many resources, as I'm sure you'll know. Our Make Space for Nature campaign helps you enjoy and give nature a bit of a helping hand. It's sort of divided into seasons, so that's worth a look. The Outdoor Learning Directory, we work with the other government agencies, so this sort of is a portal to our learning resources and resources from Scottish Forestry, SEPA, the national parks, etc. as well. Within that, we're keen to advocate the sort of progression model for outdoor learning. So thinking about moving the young person throughout their sort of learning and their
growing up from their establishment grounds out to the local green space, and then further afield to the places like national parks and national nature reserves, etc. So there's a little look at that and some of the research around that as well on that link. And below that, there's information on the national nature reserves that we have in Scotland and how you might visit. And the national parks both have travel grants that they do change the criteria, so it'll depend on the budget they have this year, but they generally target sort of disadvantaged groups or disadvantaged areas. So they're often open to you know, groups, not just school groups, any groups to visit. So hopefully that'll be useful to you. And finally, the Scottish Outdoor Access Code. It's great to build in Scottish Outdoor Access Code messages about rights and responsibilities every time you go outdoors, and just there's some resources at that web link there as well for aimed at schools again, but they might be useful for your groups. Hope that was useful. And I think Bridget's got a final slide with our contact details. Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't going to add anything else. So thank you very much, Laura. And yeah, that's great. Cheers.
Yeah, that's really, really useful. Thank you both. That was a really useful presentation. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm really outdoorsy, so I know that there's a fair few things in there that I'm going to be picking up on afterwards, which is really useful. Two things that you referenced that I think people on this call will be really interested in. You did mention the 5 ways to wellbeing report. It's a bit of a tongue twister. And also you mentioned the Scottish Forestry research, and it'd be great if you could share the links to those, and we would obviously share them with the wider group. That would be really useful to hear those kind of reports and research in a bit more detail. So that would be really, really great. So thank you very much. As always, if there's any questions for Bridget and Challenge, please do feel free to put those into the chat. There hasn't been any that have come up so far, so I think you're off the hook. But if there's any that anybody think of just now, then that would be great. And at this point, I'd like to welcome Frances and Mary. And I think what's a really good link here is taking some of the things that Bridget and Shannon have talked about and putting it into a CLD context, and how they've then used that and kind of developed that. So that's going to be really great. Derek, can I ask you, seeing as my IT is dodgy, can you bring up the presentation if that's okay, please? And I'm not sure who's going first. Is it Frances or Mary?
Yes, it's myself. Yes, I'm going first. So maybe if both of us just introduce ourselves, and then I'll kick off the presentation, pass over.
Great, lovely.
Mary.
Thanks, Frances.
Yeah. So my name's Frances Bradley. Both Mary and I work for GLASGOW Life. I've got a citywide remit. I support our communities teams in adult learning. So part of that is around programme development and programme content, as well as external funding. So this morning, Mary and I are going to talk about the pilot adult learning walking programme that we are on the cusp of launching. It's been taking a while, but we'll talk you through the work that we've developed around this. Mary, do you want to introduce yourself, and then we can move on to the next slide?
Just to say good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Rocks. It's lovely to be here to talk about the pilot of the walking programme. I work for GLASGOW Life. My remit is adult learning, and I cover southeast of Glasgow. So just to say hello.
Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so one of the drivers around us developing this new adult learning walking programme is obviously all of us have been in a very difficult situation for over a year now, and our learning has had to flip to an online offer. In Glasgow, we are still not been able to establish indoor face-to-face offers with our adult learners, and we know that while some learners have got on very well with online learning, it's not an option or preference for many learners, you know, particularly in terms of our ESOL learners who've maybe got lower level English levels, and some of our adult literacies learners have struggled. We've managed to get devices for a number of folk, and we continue to promote that. But even as we move on to blended learning, we're recognising, you know, that online is going to be a challenge. So we know that we are having to look at being much more flexible in what we can offer our learners, and that supporting wellbeing, that's already been touched on. I think there is a fantastic link, obviously, between the two presentations this morning, because while part of CLD at the core is the wellbeing of the adults and participants that we all work with, and very much about empowering, about collaborative working with our learners, I think the well-being of all of us is much higher up on our agendas and our radars. So walking, being outdoors, being able to connect in a very informal setting with learners, we were recognising there was real value there. And even before the pandemic, social isolation was something that was a real priority in terms of the contribution that adult learning could make to that. And I think sometimes there's a danger that those social connections can be underplayed. I don't think there will be moving forward, but we clearly in adult learning have to look at learning outcomes. That's why people engage with us. But those other benefits of confidence and self-esteem, well-being, and the value of social connections, I think all of us have become even more aware of how crucial they are in our work. And we see being able to engage outdoors will have real benefits, but just practically our facilities indoors for quite a while to come will be quite limited. So we do need to open up our learning spaces. Next slide, please. So in terms of that, we're all obviously going through recovery just now, and we work in Glasgow, so you'll know that hopefully next week things will improve a bit, but we've had a bit of a bump in the road in terms of our recovery. So we're also working to obviously the COVID guidelines. So we're not really sure when the 2 metre regulations will change. A lot of our learning goes on in our libraries, and Glasgow Life runs the community centres, libraries, etc. in Glasgow. Some of the libraries have reopened. There's been quite a lot of press about this as well. So some have reopened. There's a programme to reopen more as we move forward, but we do know that indoor learning space will be limited for a while, so we need to look beyond that. Before all of this happened, before March 2020, and Mary will talk about this a bit more, there had been some walking sessions tested with some of our ESOL learners, and we had very, very positive feedback from those learners. And in particular, it encouraged conversations. And while we obviously run conversation cafes, as part of our offer, I think when you're in an outdoor space, then conversations can flow a wee bit more easily sometimes. So certainly that was the feedback that we had from our learners. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think this has possibly already been touched on, but we're all working now on our new CLD plans. And we noticed in there, which is fantastic, that outdoor learning is recognised in the guidance as a vital aspect of Scotland's curriculum, and looking at it being a safe and challenging learning environment. And we've already touched on that achievement, attainment and well-being. So we definitely, when we're looking at this adult learning walking programme, we're looking at starting it off, rolling it out, but very aware that there are other opportunities, there are other potential experiences that our learners could have as a result of taking part in the walking programme. Okay, so next slide, please. And I'm going to now hand over to Mary for a few slides, and then I'll jump back in a minute.
Thank you, Frances. Just to kind of talk about just the CLD plan. At the time, the CLD plan for 2018 to 2021, we were very mindful about some of the points, and I'll just mention a couple of the points. And this was about organising walking. I'll talk about that later, but it was just to remove barriers for learners, as Frances talked about, removing barriers and help learners achieve their goals. So this is a way of hopefully providing something new and something different and something that we already tried out as well. And in the CLD plan, I've just got a couple of notes from it. It's to make learning fun, help learners achieve their goals, and also support learners to move on. This can be a moving on experience for learners as well. And that's something that we've talked about in Glasgow Life. Sometimes you have learners who are just at that stage, they're not ready to move on to any, they don't know what to move on to. They've been given guidance, but COVID has now changed things about different paths that people can take at the moment, but it's also about a moving on and supporting learners to move on and to remove barriers and to provide a wide range of options, a wider range of options. So that's what we're talking about. So on the points here, so adult learning guidance, with adult learning guidance conversations, and a college visit pre-COVID pandemic led to learners requesting a sports taster programme. And we were very fortunate in Glasgow Life to have really good connections with Glasgow Sport and Good Moves, and they were so supportive in helping us achieve this. So many groups did meet outside the libraries through the Good Move project, which is part of Glasgow Life, and that's a walking project. They meet outside libraries, and they're continuing to do so just now. We also had the experience of the Good Move project and my colleague in sport as well. So it was about training, and the infrastructure was there, including one of the things to be very mindful about was the COVID risk assessment, to put that in place. And this was, so it was to put the COVID risk assessment. We have risk assessments because of COVID, etc., and very detailed risk assessments. But this was in particular regarding walking, and my colleague Heather in Good Move had all this information and was really helpful in sharing this information. So initially it was about making the links with sport. First of all, we put on a programme of sport, it was walking. It was a walk first of all, and before that, during the summer period, we would arrange a summer programme for ESOL learners, for example, a visit to the hidden gardens, a visit to the stables, and other activities. Can we move on to the next slide? Is that okay? So as a result of this, we arranged training with Good Move, put on training in for us, for our staff, and this was with Paths for All, and this was for 14 staff participated in an online Paths for All training course, and this was staff from ALN, an ALN background, Adult Literacy and Numeracy, English as a Second Language, and Creative Writing. And through that, staff were given access to really fantastic resources in the form of a welcome book, walk leader cue cards, and a health walk agreement. That this is health walk agreement will be rolled out, would be for learners taking part in the health walks. And I'm really delighted to see that Paths for All, and through Heather from Sport, from Good Moves, we now have the health walk agreement is in different languages, numerous languages. It's been translated into numerous languages. So that's great to hear. As a result of the training, the 14 staff from all over Glasgow Life, the feedback was really positive from staff, and they're all very keen to start using outdoors as an opportunity to open up further learning for learners and engage with learners. So we're just at that stage that we're just waiting for the go-ahead for this to start. Okay, could I get the next slide as well, please? So the launch was delayed. Unfortunately, the launch was delayed of providing outdoor learning to our learners for ESOL learners, adult literacy and creative writing. Initially, we were talking about providing it in a local park, and the park we're thinking of just now is Glasgow Green initially. So we're just waiting on the go-ahead to start this programme, and then we'll roll this out throughout the city to other parks. But first of all of our staff need to go through risk assessment training. And once we're given the go-ahead for that, we can arrange adult learning in different parks in Glasgow to provide a service citywide for Glasgow Life. But we've got the links with the Good Moves project and also Paths for All, which is key. As Frances talked about learning outcomes are very important, but we had a really good discussion about this, and we've decided on 2 learning outcomes to make it as supportive as possible for the tutors and the learners. But it's very important, and the 2 learning outcomes will be a health and wellbeing learning outcome, and also a learning outcome, for example, for adult literacy, for ESOL or creative writing. We've also had a lot of discussion about targeting the most isolated learners, including those who have not engaged in online learning. So that's the priority at the moment. And Glasgow Life staff have been using this time to develop lesson plans based on walks, concentrating on the parks or areas where the walk will take place in the rollout programme for the city, and sharing these. They've been given the opportunity to share these ideas with other tutors online. Just recently, last week, one of my tutors forwarded some examples, some ideas for the themed walks, and it's very interesting. It was it's a programme for 3 to 5 weeks, just initially. Once all the requirements have been approved by Glasgow Life, as Frances was saying, we will launch this once circumstances permit. And key to everything is the pilot programme will be evaluated with feedback from learners and staff. But key to everything is to make sure that we have a plan of learning outcomes, to be flexible, it's to be fun, but it's also targeted for learners that perhaps we've not been able to reach, who haven't been engaging in the online learning. Next, is there another slide there for me?
Well, I think I'm going to just jump in this slide, Mary, and then hand back over to you.
Yep.
So Mary's just touched on the outcomes that we want to capture around the walking programme. So we are very clear that obviously, as it comes under Paths for All, that we want to be able to capture those health and wellbeing outcomes from learners. So we are not making it complicated, but we're setting up systems to ensure that, because it's an adult learning themed walk, that we want to be able to demonstrate that there are adult learning outcomes here. We've got ambitions to test whether or not we can use the learning that takes place outdoors to support some evidence around SQA communications units. So clearly the speaking and listening are probably going to be the key ones when tutors are meeting outdoors, but we very much see meeting outdoors, experiencing outdoor spaces as inspiration for reading and writing as well. We every year participate in the Glasgow I Write Book Festival, and to bring different organisations together, we use a theme. So of course it was March last year, we were just about to have our events, and our theme last year was friendship. And I think some folk have seen the circulation that we managed wonderfully to get some ESOL learners from Glasgow Life and Glasgow ESOL Forum together to share some of their reading on the online. It's a free event, but I'm referring to that because some of that writing was on friendship, and it's a nice way to pull folk together with a theme. So we see the outdoors as potentially a theme, that can inspire reading and writing, as well as some conversations around outdoors. So we're certainly going to be looking at that, but we will retain our learner-centred approaches, and we'll keep developing our learning plans. We want to make sure that we are still reflecting needs and interests of learners, and we want to make sure that if learners have any specific learning needs, that we're addressing them and that we're meeting them. And we think that this approach to outdoors learning may very well be, more flexible than some of our more formal or even informal settings. So, as I was saying earlier, we are expecting to have to be delivering blended learning for quite a while, and that we see the outdoor learning aspect as part potentially of a wider offer. So it may very well be, and it's likely, that learners will be receiving other types of learning support beyond the time that they spend with a tutor on the walking programme. We also see it as potentially an opportunity to meet with new learners. You know, when we get referrals for a new learner and you want to have that first conversation with someone about what it is that we offer, whether, you know, our programmes are right for them, and potentially to gauge a wee bit of level in terms of English conversation, for example, then being able to meet outdoors is going to be an advantage. When we scope out our space just now in terms of indoor space, it is very limited. So we do want to look at the walking programmes as flexibly as we can. And Mary's already touched on the potential for that progression conversation with someone and looking to see what their, pardon the pun, next steps will be. I'll pass back over to Mary for the next slide.
Yes, just as Frances was saying, just about the learning environment outdoors, there are so many benefits, and also just to mention just about the social isolation. You know, many of our learners perhaps will have been isolated within the home, or so it's about getting people involved in meeting up, connecting, the benefits of outdoor learning, the benefits of engaging with other learners and meeting tutors, and also using the outdoors as a wonderful resource for learning and engagement. We've got a note here of resources, and I just can't stress enough, the resources are terrific online, and we've just highlighted a few. I know in the previous speakers, you had fantastic resource list up there, but there are so many resources if you just click on. I was clicking on last night and this morning again, just to focus on the Education Scotland website, and there are just so many fantastic resources. I'll just mention a couple. Under the Education Scotland, they've got the National Improvement Hub, and it's a summary of outdoor learning resources. There's also there are papers on acknowledging, there's one from the University of Glasgow, it's an outdoor learning brief, but there are so many that I just can't highlight enough and praise enough all the resources. And also Paths for All, I've got great resources, and I've got the resources here. I was just looking at them again, the cards that tutors will have when they're out on the walk, high vis, the walk leader, and also the new way of working now is for us will be that when learners and tutors are out on walks, it's all about the test. It's the track, you know, it's about track, what do you call it now? It's the name, I've forgotten the name, but it's they need to register, and it's the track and trace and information being forwarded to that, just because of COVID, etc. So there's all different, it's all about adapting to new ways of working, but we're really excited about this, and we're just waiting on approval. And as Frances was saying, this has been tried and tested before the pandemic, and the feedback was fantastic. And just to see the joy in learners when we were out on that walk in Queen's Park, I'm just giving that as an example, as one walk, just the joy, and learners communicating and asking questions after the walk, but us through Glasgow Life gearing that towards true learning outcomes, but keeping it very flexible, so that we celebrate this, we celebrate outdoors, we celebrate learning. And that's, I'm just going back to again the CLD, it's about celebrating learning, embracing challenges, but at the forefront and instrumental to everything is the learner is key to everything. And it's about now, it's about adapting to this rapid change that has been brought on by the pandemic, and making it fun and valuable for learners. So that's everything. And I'm just also going to mention the Good Moves is on there as well. Glasgow Life just now have a programme of walks that are happening at the moment, but it's just us adapting our walks to the adult learning delivery. That's just the part we're waiting on.
I can see from the chat there, Marith Young. Yes. Marith, you're saying from North Lanarkshire that you're already delivering blended adult learning walks. So we'll definitely make contact around that. So we're hoping to be able to launch ours really very, very soon. So that'll be great, Marith. We'll link in there.
Great.
Your practice, fabulous. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that. I think that's going to be really inspirational for everybody on the call, because it's really good to see it working in practice. And I think you covered everything from the safeguarding to learning outcomes, working in partnerships. That was really, really great. Thank you very much. I'm just mindful of the time, so I'm just going to move on very briefly to our last information to share with you. I'm actually kind of going to be standing in at the moment for Katie Oldfield. So if you can imagine, I've morphed myself into Katie Oldfield of Maths Week Scotland. That would be great. So at this precise moment, I am just going to talk to you and cover some of the information that she has. We actually have a video which we'll send out to you afterwards, but mindful of the time now, I don't think we've got time quite to go through it. So just to make you aware that Maths Week Scotland is indeed a week of maths events that takes place. It takes place later on this year, and the dates for this year are the 27th of September to the 3rd of October. I know at this point in time you're thinking, why are we talking about adult learning and now I'm talking about maths? So I'm going to try to just very quickly come to why that is. Maths Week Scotland has got a number of themes this year. One of them is around the natural world and the world around us, and very much as well it's linking to COP and climate change. So hopefully now you're kind of now seeing that there is links to outdoor learning. Now the thing just to say, I see Gavin you're going, there is a community fund that is available through Maths Week Scotland, and so it's to try and make sure that you're aware that this community fund is available to you. The community fund it's a small grants fund of up to £2,000 that you can apply for. Very much this year they are looking for those links about the natural world and about that kind of world around us information. So if Katie was here, she's very aware of what's happening in CLD around the kind of outdoor learning, and so there's really, really great links that can be happening there. That fund is quite an open fund, as in they're looking for people to be a little bit creative with it, if you like. So things like, for instance, inspirational speakers in relation to maths, or indeed organisations that are maybe that little bit different. So it doesn't have to be something that's a very run-of-the-mill type thing. So it's worth having a look at. And again, I will share the information via email afterwards. I've just put in the comments there the Maths Week Scotland website, which does have a community section within it where you can find out the information that's on there. Now the other one just to highlight, which again really links with what people are talking about in terms of outdoor learning and these really great walks that are happening, is they also have a Maths Inside competition. Now Maths Inside also applies to outside, so it's open to learners who of all ages, so children as well as adults, and this is about taking photographs of things that you see that have a maths connection to them. So that maths connection can be as something as obscure as how many petals does this flower have, how many branches on this tree does it have, on a pine cone, how many little bits of the bits does it have, and so using that, looking at shapes, looking at so maths in its real broadest context, not just the kind of the 2+2+ maths, but that really kind of thinking about your shapes and geometry and all those things that can be hugely applied in nature to all sorts of things, snails, shells and all the rest of it. So again, something that you could really easily embed into an outdoor learning walk by just getting learners to take pictures on their phone, which most learners have these days. And again, the information for that is on the Maths Week Scotland communities section of that, so well worth having a look. Just to finish off, because I just thought I didn't say it to you, I mentioned about the communities grants, just to give you the dates of that. It's open at the moment, so please do have a look at that. It's going to have 2 rounds of grants available. So one is taking place with applications open from now through until the 3rd of June, and then it closes in the summer for those to be taken in, but then it'll open up again in August. So I'm aware that first, doesn't give you an awful lot of time to think about it, but it does open up again in August. So please do have a think about that. The other thing just to mention as well is that, say for example, you may be on this call and you're not hugely confident with maths yourself, it's to remind you that there are STEM ambassadors available for CLD that you can apply for. And again, the information for this will be sent out afterwards. And STEM ambassadors support the work around Maths Week Scotland. So you can ask for a STEM ambassador who will come and do the activities, if you like, for you to support that
Wow.
confidence in maths. So again, that information will be sent out afterwards, and worthwhile knowing that it's there. And I know the other thing Katie was going to mention is to make people aware that science centres across Scotland, as well as museums and smaller museums too, not just the big ones, but the local community museums, have agreed to take part in Maths Week Scotland as well. So it might be worthwhile just having a wee nosy at what's happening there. So I know that was a bit of a nutshell of all of that, but I think I have covered everything that should be there. And the main thing obviously was the community grants, as well as that photography competition that you might want to bid into. I've seen that that's us up to time. We will be sharing the presentations out afterwards, along with all of the links that are in the comments. So thank you to people for putting the resources up there as well. We'll collate those out and we'll email them out afterwards. And if I can just lastly say a really big thank you to all of my presenters today, Bridget and Sharon and Mary and Francis and Dara for working IT fantastically in the background. And it's great to all of you for coming along, and hopefully you find that information really useful. So yes, hopefully we'll all get some better weather and we can enjoy the outdoors for ourselves, for our own mental health and well-being, as well as for all of your learners too. So thank you very much for coming along today, everybody, and it was great to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.